Ladies and gentlemen, now we're there. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. And if you can see a big shadow cast across, it's coming from my guest, Laurence Shahlaei in the house. Laws, how are you doing, brother?
I'm very well, mate. How are you?
Yeah, all right, mate. It's great to have you on the show. And the first one of our Strongman guests. What about it? Yes, it's quite. Hopefully, sign of things to come, mate. But yeah, it's uncertain times at the moment. How are you guys coping with this coronavirus thing?
Yeah, we're all okay here. Just Liz's dad's unfortunately not too well, so we've got to be careful with him. But the rest of us are all fine. Just I think most of the population will be fine anyway. It's just we need to be considerate about the vulnerable, and I guess take the advice that the government's given us. But it's not easy. I know a lot of people are getting stressed out about things and events being cancelled, etc. But I think we just all got to kind of work together and get through it as quick as we can.
It's quite an interesting time, Loz, isn't it? Because obviously, I mean, you see the things coming up 40 years now. We've seen, or 40 plus years, we've seen of the world's strongest man. Could we potentially be looking at a situation where this is the first year in living memory where we don't see a worlds?
Yeah, I mean, well, you see it with the Olympics. They're talking about kind of thrown in the World Cup, things like that. So yeah, unfortunately, it certainly looks like it's going to be pushed back later in the year at best. But I mean, it's not ideal, and I know a lot of people get frustrated and they're upset about things, but there's always another competition. We need to get through this, and there'll be another competition. If we don't get through this, there won't be another competition. So I think that's something I learned early on. When I was kind of younger, I wanted to be competing all the time. I wanted to be involved with everything. And then obviously you get older, I experienced a lot of injuries and stuff like that. And it actually made me realize, all right, it's not the end of the world if you miss an event. As long as you're still training, as long as life's kind of going on, you can recover and come back from things, and there's always another opportunity. So that's kind of the way I'm going to treat this. No different to those kind of situations I've been in before with injuries and things. There's always time in the future to sort of compete and do other things. So as frustrating as it is, and I understand that, you put your heart and soul into everything that we do, as an athlete, how hard it is and the dedication needed to reach the kind of top. But we're all in the same situation right now. We have no control ourselves over what the government are doing and whether events are going ahead or being cancelled. So all you can do is focus on yourself, make sure you're still training hard, make sure you're ready for when that opportunity arrives.
How's it affected your sort of calendar or what you had on the immediate horizon, mate? Did you had you got something that you were just working up to now? We know you've been active in the powerlifting game and doing very well. Hey,
no one's coming to say hi. Say hi to everyone.
Hi.
Oh, hello. Yeah, good timing, Mummy.
Hi.
Liz has just arrived.
So Mummy's here.
Yeah.
Daddy, relax.
So yeah, you were just talking about your schedule.
Training-wise, obviously recovering from my Achilles, which is going pretty well. I did a push-pull powerlifting competition 2 weekends ago, and I won that, which was good. I'm still nowhere near top-level strongman right now. My calf is still weak, so for a lot of strongman events such as truck pulling, Atlas stones, even like push pressing overhead, anything that involves like an extension from the ankle and flexion, I'm still a bit weak. So I'm focusing on powerlifting this year in terms of my own training, just to really give me something to focus on. I've got some big goals. I feel I'm capable of a British record in the squat, so that's kind of a target I've got for later in the year. Put up a big total. And use this year to sort of rebuild and hopefully get back into some strongman comps next year. I've been having a bit of fun doing some arm wrestling as well. I had to have a bit of a break from it while I prepared for this comp, just because obviously I'm fairly new to arm wrestling, and the pain in the tendons in the elbow and the arm, it was really my pressing days. So I've had about a 2 month break from the arm wrestling, but I'm going to go back next week and just get myself slowly back into it. I'm only doing arm wrestling for fun. I've got no sort of expectations on myself. I'm trying to enjoy my training full stop right now. I've had, almost 17 years competing at the top level. And I've always been someone that's enjoyed competing in something. I was British champion at Kung Fu as a youngster, played rugby to a high level. I was a decent athlete as a junior. So I've always had something. And if I don't have anything to focus on, I get distracted. I can actually get a bit depressed as well. I sort of can, I need something to get me up every day and focus on. So
sure.
training and sport have always been a massive part of my life. And then away from that, I kind of set up my own online training business, which is going really well. I've coached a lot of, really good athletes over the last few years. A lot of good up and coming guys and girls. Some that have actually competed at Worlds from complete beginners. So a real good mix. Really enjoy it.
There's a bit of background on that, Loz, in terms of, the people watching this. They may be interested to get into that and maybe don't know that service is available to them. What kind of thing do you actually focus on, and what would you try to bring about in these guys?
So whenever I coach someone, it's always about their development.
Yep.
And I was asked the other day by a client, because he's two months into a program. He's like, "Oh, so when do we go for a PB?" And I was trying to explain to him that it always varies depending on the level of the athlete, weaknesses in terms of technique, what needs working on. You can get some people, their technique's perfect, they're kind of new to it and they're progressing really fast. You can push a little bit harder. Other people, you've got to they've been training a long time, they've developed bad habits, they've got injuries, and you have to understand each case is individual. So there is no one kind of way fits all my training. I tend to block it. I break it down into 4-week blocks, but I still make changes. I expect my clients to communicate with me on a regular basis after training sessions. So we'll always make adjustments and work towards their goals, realistic goals as well. I find sometimes you get people, they get a bit crazy and ahead of themselves. I could say I want to be the world's best arm wrestler, but it's not going to happen within three weeks or something like that. I've had people, I want to deadlift 400 kilos, and they're deadlifting 200 kilos.
Yeah,
so it's not as easy as that. It takes a long time. And even
how much of this is down to in general strength, mate? Interesting to understand really what your perspective would be around how much of strength is genetic. And why I say that is because if you look at you as an individual, as you've already said, you had the background in combat sports, you had the background as an athlete in various, and you'd always excelled at these things. When you came into Strongman in 2005, you were sort of pretty meteoric rise. You kicked in hard and you developed and you were a real force at world level pretty quick and was a dominant force in the UK. Do you think that's down to you genetically?
Partially, yes, definitely. Genetics play a huge role in, you look at some of you look at someone like Hafthor Bjornsson, for instance. That guy is a genetic freak. Brian Shaw, also another genetic freak. We're not 5'5" with tiny little kind of frame, small wrists, small knees. We're built to do this kind of thing. And there's a lot of hard training that goes into that. But genetics play a huge role. Physical frame, you can't change, what you're kind of given. If you kind of know what I mean, you can't make your bones bigger. You can't sort of,
What about the guy who's got the frame, or the girl who's got the frame? If all the sort of physical tools would aesthetically appear to be there, do you also see a real varying level of guys that will just come into the gym and they've got immoral strength straight off the bat? I mean, Eddie always talks about that. He said, when I was a kid, I could lift super heavy. We see it in arm wrestling where you get a guy who just comes in and they are a monster straight off the bat. Were you that guy, or did you have to work that little bit hard?
In some aspects, yes, and some aspects, no. I was always very, very strong in my lower body, my legs. So I've always been a fast sprinter, even though I was like a big kid. I would surprise people at how quick I could move. A lot of fast twitch muscle fibers, very, very powerful in the lower body. Yeah. Upper body, not so much. I was never a good presser. I was never one of these guys that could just jump in the gym and bench a massive weight. The upper body stuff I had to work a lot harder at. But in terms of athleticism, that came quite naturally to me. I was always quick. I could always move well. I could move with weight well. And that's massively important in Strongman. And I think one of the things people kind of don't appreciate with Strongman is that most competitions you're looking at 5 or 6 events. And really, you only need that power, strength, kind of, real static strength for 1 or 2 events. You can be a good Strongman without necessarily being the strongest man in the world. That's not. I mean, as the sports progress now, we've got to ridiculous levels of strength. But I'm thinking more back to when I first got into it. And you had someone like Mariusz Pudzianowski as the best guy. Yeah. Points were a little bit lighter. He was never the statically strongest guy, but he was strong enough and athletically very, very kind of, explosive, very fast. His fitness was good enough. People, you know, in strongman terms, he was super fit, but he's not going to go and run a marathon or something like that. But, you know, for the specific sport he did, he was more than fit enough. And he kind of led the way. And then you had new guys come through, Derek Poundstone, who took it to another level, Zadrunas. And then, you know, when Zadrunas came on the scene and started dominating, he took the strength level up again. But he could move very well. He could still kind of, you know, recover from events. He wasn't just some big static blob. He could do it all. And then you got the likes of, you know, Brian Shaw, Hafthor, Eddie, that just took it up another level again. And it's just been improving and improving the last 20 years, you know, as long as I've been involved. I mean, when I started, I've surpassed every single world record that existed.
That's great, isn't it?
So the standard kind of better and better all the time.
You make a great point. That's a fantastic stat, that. The fact that, you know, the bar's just gone incrementally up and up and up. And it's funny, you talk about the fact that you had the strong legs, the strong lower body. You have been hit with various injuries, but talk about cruel. You were always the man for moving with weight. The yoke, the farmers, things like that were always rock strong for you. But you got to get hit with your calf. I mean, I know we saw you with the deadlift when you blew your lat. We've seen other things over your career. But the Achilles injury, absolutely unbelievable. I remember talking to you at the Giants event about that and the fact that you were, at that time, feeling rock strong. You were ready to go and you were quite excited about your prospects there.
I got myself into good shape. You know, I've said this before, and I'm not sort of bad-mouthing World's Strongest Man because they've given me a huge opportunity. There's some brilliant people that work on the show. Yeah. But they change events last minute. And, you know, we were told to train for a 450 kilo yoke for 20 meters. So you focus on speed for those type of events. For elite level strongmen, you know, 450s, it's a decent weight. It's not too heavy. We can focus on being really, really quick. And that's what I did. I focused my training on being fast. We got there and we were told, right, you're going to do a 160 farmer's walk for 7 meters, a 460 yoke for 7 meters, and then a 610 kilo yoke. Now, when you're training for 610 kilos on your body, you have to get your body used to that kind of weight. You don't just jump up. And it wasn't just me. Like, everyone struggled with it. People were, you know, injuring their feet. Unfortunately, I blew my Achilles completely. I lifted it, took a step, and my Achilles went. Mm-hmm. And we'd had a long day. You know, I was there, I think, from 10 in the morning or 9 in the morning, I think I got there. And then I did an event, and then I was the last group to go. There was a thunderstorm. So I was literally in the tent all day. I think it was about 7 p.m. by the time I did the second event, dehydrated, not, you know, fed enough. And it's just not good enough conditions for the best athletes in the world. Yeah. In my opinion, you know, if you want to see the best performances, you need to be telling them. Either you do it two ways. You go back to the olden days, you don't tell anyone anything, or every athlete knows all the events well in advance so they can prepare properly and things don't change. And this is, you know, this is one of the. I personally don't think 5 events is enough to decide who is the best in the world for strongman. You know, I'd rather see something like the CrossFit Games style kind of competition where you've got maybe 10 or 12 or 15 events and everyone does them, rather than having 30 athletes with different groups, like 5 guys in each group, have maybe 20 of the best guys in the world have to qualify and they all do every event. And then you really see who's the best all-round strength athlete. And it also gives guys that are good at certain events an opportunity to shine as well.
So you'd have fewer guys there doing a greater expanse of events over a period of time.
Fewer guys in total. I mean, at the moment, they have like 10 guys in the final. Yeah. In each group, there's 5 or 6 guys. Mm-hmm. Rather than that, I would say have 20 guys or 16, 12, whatever it is. It doesn't really matter. And then say have 8 to 12 events to really decide who is the best. Like in, you know, I'm a big darts fan. So you look at like some of the smaller darts competitions, it's best of 6. But you go to like the World Championships, you know, you're playing best of, you know, 20, something like that. Yeah. And it's that's when you really see who the absolute best are over a duration or in terms of strongman over lots of different, you know, events. Even in arm wrestling, there's different tactics that people use, you know.
Even the format in arm wrestling, you know, you've got your main draw knockout format. Yeah. Which has always been.
You could have someone go against you and surprise you with, you know, they might use a technique that you just kind of didn't expect them to do. It takes you down. But in a proper kind of match where it's best of 6, for instance, you've got time to make adjustments and come back. Whereas if it's that short distance, it's fun, and I do agree with competitions like that. But I think for the pinnacle of your sport, it needs to be over more distance or more events. I could pick 5 events that suit me to beat anyone in the world.
It's always been that way, hasn't it? Like you say,
could any of the top 20 or 30 strongmen in the world.
Yeah.
You could always pick events and with slight little changes to them and your own equipment and stuff like that. And then, you've got an advantage. But if it's on that fair playing field with the absolute best, that's when you see who is the greatest overall.
You made the reference to Marius. And obviously, they had the 5 titles and obviously was at that time seen as the best of all time. Yet within the strongman community, not so much. Now, there's various reasons for that, which we don't need to go into. But ultimately, where do you stand on the whole needs to be heavy thing? Because there's sort of that thirst for iron, isn't there? Everybody wants to see that super heavy event. The Arnold's getting a lot of fame for that because it's super heavy. But there's a toll. There's an injury toll there, and it's a very real one. And for the guys like yourself, who this is your living, that can be a difficult price to pay if you end up with a serious injury, that the likes of which you've seen there. Where's the balance point, mate? Do you think there is one? Is it just that you need more recovery between events? Because you look at things like Arnold's, things like the Giants, people probably don't get their head around how physically taxing that is to do that many events, heavy events, in a very short period of time.
Yeah, I think the fact that the standard's so high now is it makes it very hard. Whenever you see, for instance, if we use the deadlift, the max deadlift world championships as an example, most of the guys pushing to ridiculous numbers end up pulling out of the whole show because their bodies are just so taxed from pushing to that kind of crazy. I mean, every time Eddie did the deadlift, he pulled out of Europe's, or even before he got the 500. At other times where he was competing in both, he did the deadlift and he was just screwed after it. And most of us were, when I pulled 435 and then I went for 446, I ended up tearing my lat. You're out of the strongman show. So often the guys that did well in the strongman show were the guys that weren't deadlifting as much.
Yeah.
So I think when you start pushing to these kind of crazy levels that the guys are capable of now, recovery is a huge issue. It just takes so much out of you to lift these crazy weights. You have to remember, I mean, for people watching, we're all made of the same stuff. We're all flesh and bone. But the heavier those weights get, the more it takes out of your body, the more recovery you need. If you're a beginner and you're deadlifting 150 kilos, you can deadlift near your max quite regularly. But if you're lifting over 400 kilos and then going on to like 450, 500 kilos, it takes a month to recover from that kind of. I remember when I first pulled 433 kilos in a competition. The week after, I went and trained with Darren Sadler, and I struggled to pull 300. And a few weeks before that, I was pulling 300 like it was a speed rep. But that max effort, it takes a lot out of you. And I think there is a balance. You can't have it too light because then you start, you look at what CrossFit athletes are capable of. You look at what some of the lightweight category guys are capable of. The weights need to be selected correctly. And you can pick within reason. It doesn't have to be the heaviest, but like anything between a 400 and 500 kilo yoke, focusing on speed, in my opinion, is a good event. When you start going over the 550 to 600 kilos, I mean, I'll give you an example. I did 600 kilo yoke, or 580 it was, in Dubai. I broke a world record on that, and I trained specifically for a heavy yoke. I did it in 15 seconds. I think Thor and Kiliaskowski did it in around 20 seconds. And then there was a couple of others that finished, and then most of the field didn't even get halfway. Yeah. And that's the best guys in the world. When you've got that many of the best guys in the world that are struggling that much, it starts to look a little bit too heavy. When you go to fields and they're using the ridiculously heavy stuff and people can barely move it, the best guys in the world, it looks silly. I think it's better when you've got one or two that can make it look fairly comfortable, then everyone else is kind of struggling with it, and then maybe one or two that really kind of, find it too hard. That's the kind of balance you want. when it's either everyone finishes it and it's like a split second between 1 to 10, that's too light.
Mm-hmm.
And when no one's finishing it, it's too heavy. So it's getting that balance right. There's always exceptions, you know, like Mark Felix, for instance, on a grip event, he's head and shoulders above everyone else. He's just so good that he can almost make the rest of us look average.
Yeah.
And Eddie on a deadlift, for instance, you know, deadlift for max, especially when he hit the 500, he was just head and shoulders above everyone else. There's now people catching up because he set those marks. But those are, you know, deadlift for max is a bit different to, say, a moving event. And I think you've got to still combine that athleticism in strongman. Otherwise, we may as well just go and do powerlifting. And like I said, I love powerlifting, but I like separating the two sports.
Yeah.
You know, I think in strongman, it's about being a strong athlete, whereas in powerlifting, it's just about those 3 lifts being the strongest you can possibly be on them.
It is a blurring of the boundaries, isn't it, mate? Because you look at it now, and some of the lifts that you're seeing on the strongman circuit are performed by the strongman competitors are right there in any powerlifting format. They're ridiculous, you know.
Oh, I mean, if you look in the UK, there's not many that have really crossed over, but Graham Hicks has the British record right now. Every time I've competed in powerlifting in the UK, I've won.
Yeah,
I've done 6 powerlifting competitions and I've won every single one of them. Not just winning my weight class, but winning the overall, which bases you on your weight as well. So
yeah, sure,
gives an advantage to the smaller guys.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's some? First question would be, in terms of the sort of events and the format and the weight, do you see that is being driven by the promoters? Do you think it's being driven, or there's a thirst to see those heavyweights by the fans? Do you think it's there to provide that potential for a crossover from the powerlifting? Because obviously in the digital age, everybody's seeing a massive attempt at a bench. We've just seen it with Julius now.
Yeah.
If they made the Arnold so that it was more leaning towards that kind of route, does that then open the door for Maddox to come in and start competing in strongman, and you get that head-to-head, which is a bit of a dream scenario?
I think for promoters, what they're after is bums on seats. So anything that the fans kind of buy into, then obviously that's the route to go. And I don't have a problem with that, but maybe separate the shows rather than kind of always having a world log lifting or world deadlifting championships along with Europe's Strongest Man. Don't take away from the strongman comp. Run them separately, or run a record attempt show where you're going to have 3 or 4 events that are just world records. You know, have the log world record, have the deadlift world record, maybe another world record as a separate event. I think sometimes we focus so much on the log and the deadlift that the whole show gets overlooked. And also the prize money gets taken away from the. You could have an athlete that's over 6 events is way better than the one guy that's good at 1 event.
Yeah.
But now because of the way they're running things, if you just specialize in one thing, you sort of, it's almost better to do that. And I've actually got a young athlete that I'm making him just focus on the log at the moment because he's so close to breaking the world junior log record. And it'll give him some recognition online and stuff like that. But in a whole, he's close to hitting I think he's going to be attempting 192 kilos.
Wow.
Which is
very impressive.
As a junior. But that would beat my PB on log. But then in every other event, I'd destroy him.
Yeah.
In competition. And that's, we're focusing on a reason because it's, he's capable of it, and hopefully it'll get him some, online recognition.
Exactly that. Yeah. It's a signal flare, isn't it? Gets him noticed.
I totally understand that side of it now. I didn't so much when I was younger. When you're younger, you just think, the best guy should win. Whereas now I understand it's a business and it's about putting bums on seats. So it's why I'm not that worried about going to Worlds anymore and competing as much. I'd rather focus on the social media side of things.
Yeah, absolutely, mate.
It rewards you a lot more than placing 3rd in a competition will.
Ladies and gentlemen, our first sit down with Loz. We're going to be back in just a minute. If you want to see that, tune in for part 2. It's coming shortly. And remember, if you like what we're doing, share, subscribe, like it, let them know, spread the word, and we'll see you in a minute.